thing. I don't know that. Yeah, okay, there we go. Oh, I pushed it too many times. Let's go back. Okay, so this whole thing's going to be about data. I think I missed a slide here. There was an introductory. This one. This is my phone number. I'm sorry I have an out-of-state number, but I had to go out to Maine when my mom was sick, and I got stuck with that. So it's a real number. It actually I pick it up sometimes. Leave me a message if you need to talk to me. The presentation is going to be about data for your field approval. Since I have the DART, I got that a couple years ago, it's going on 2 years now, and I got some things that have come up that I need to talk about. Let me move on. I'm from Talkeetna. I've been an IA since '95. I had a business in Kodiak for a lot of years and moved up to Talkeetna Air Taxi. Worked at PK Floats in Maine for a little while and maintained a lot of things. This was another old coasty thing. Kind of got my start in Alaska right there on the back of a boat. That's out in the Bering. Pretty fun. We didn't do any flying on days like that, I don't think. But we actually had to come home to the seas like that before. Come back, it's like, where do you go? You know, the only thing to land on is that boat. So anyways, moving on. With the field approval process, that's something that it's kind of near to my heart. I had a lot of field approval, the field approval things that needed to fix, saltwater stuff. All the years that we had great ideas, couldn't get them approved for various reasons. And this DAR program kind of came out, and thanks to Scott Norman for letting me have that. It's a privilege and not a right. They tell you that about a million times. They make you check it off. You got to take training, and the first hour of the training is pretty much just, it's a privilege and not a right. Okay, I get it. Anyways, so if I screw this up, they'll probably take it away from me. I don't know. But I got myself into this talk, so, by volunteering like an idiot. So here I am. But I didn't mean to, but it happened. I got 6 otters I maintain up there. I got a few mechanics. We don't have any more beavers, but we had 3 of those for a while, and a couple 185s, a couple R44s, and various other airplanes that we try to take care of. Moving on. I wanted to talk about practical data because people come to me. I have the function code. I don't work for the FAA, right? Let's get it clear. I'm a DAR. You come to me, you're going to pay me, but I'll get you your approval if you have data. You have to have approvable data, and that's what this talk's going to be about. If you don't have data, you can't get a field approval. So, if you know how this goes, and you've been trying to get field approvals for years, like me. You'd come with block 8 filled in on your 337 to your PMI and say, what do you think? And they'd take it home with them, and you may or may not hear back from them. And in the 90s, sometimes it'd be like, yeah, this is okay. Other people have done it before, and they'd stamp it and sign it. Well, those days aren't completely gone, but it's doable. You just have to know the system. And it's not like that anymore, but it is doable. And the way it's doable is how I'm going to tell you. So you got a good idea. You want to get a field approval. Who has one? Somebody give me one that they've done recently. How many people have done a field approval recently and got it approved? Okay. Did I do it? Oh, good. Okay, not very many. Oh, there you go. All right. Yeah, I mean, look, not very many. And there's a lot of mods going on out there that need to be done. Who wants one done? Well, I mean, all right, first let's get this prerequisite going here. Not these prerequisites, but I get to talk to the guys who didn't do enough annuals this year, right? So you guys are all being punished, and you have to listen to me. Is that what happened? This is the punishment you get for not doing 4 annuals. Anyways, so you got a good idea. You come to me, use my contact, took a picture of it. If you want me to go back, I will. Call me, and this is what we'll talk about. You're gonna need access to the airplane, right? And its logs. You'd be surprised how many people call me and say, well, the airplane's down in the lower 48, but it's coming back. It's like, look, get your logs and find them. Is it yours? Who's the owner? I need to know these things. And then this is a big thing. It's kind of going to be a rant, so warning. Access to DRS. Access to the internet. You're going to get to DRS. You're going to find things. Now, I don't want to hear when you call me say, I got a great idea, but I never touch a computer, and I'm not tech savvy, and I won't be able to send you even the simplest things or look anything up online. You're an IA, or at least you're supposed to be, so you have to be able to at least get to DRS, right? So you can look at ADs and things like that. So hopefully everybody, I hated that system when it first came out, but I've kind of got used to it. There's no more RGL. It still comes up as an error, but DRS, you got to get in there. You get into DRS, you can find your ACs, which you're going to need, your type design approvals, all your regulations, your CARs, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, your FARs, and a lot more. It's all in one location. So it kind of, the search part of it, hopefully it gets better, but you can work with it. And for what we're doing here, it works really great. It does. So, get into it, learn it, figure it out, because you're not getting a field approval unless you can learn at least the rudimentary aspects of working a computer and the internet. So don't even call me if you say that, talk to your PMI. They love that kind of stuff. Then we're going to go to the type certificate of the airplane. You're going to look at, it's under design approvals in DRS. So you're going to look at that and you're going to mark down whether that thing is a car airplane or a FAR airplane. If you're old airplanes, a lot of them are Car 3, you're going to look on there, you're going to find production or certification basis in the type certificate, right? Write that down, because later you'll see why. You want to know if it's a car airplane. If it's a Car 3 airplane, mark it down. Then you're going to go back to the home page, check and see if you're actually registered. I know it sounds stupid, but you'd be surprised how many people come to me and they don't have a registered airplane. Well, I got a pink slip. You can't register it. I just found this out. You can't modify it if it's still on a pink slip. If you just bought it, you got to wait for Oak City to whatever they do down there. I don't know, And so if you just bought it, here's my advice. Go ahead and just apply for the 90-day extension right now, because they're going to get that. You're going to need it, and maybe 90 more days. It might take them a year to get your registration done. I guess they're trying to start to catch up now, right? No way. That's like a record. I've seen, yeah. I mean, I've seen them go like 9 months, more than that, Yeah. I had to apply for the 90-day extension twice. So, and I got in trouble. Anyways, that's something to think about. You can't do it until it's on there, because you can't do a 337 or anything on the old guy's name. You got to have your name on everything. So, tried to do that the other day, and we had to put it on pause. I had to ask. So that's something. And then here's probably the biggest thing. On DRS, you're going to find AC 43210. That's the Bible for field approvals. And there's other stuff. Tony was talking about, the 8900s and stuff like that. There's other stuff, and you can get into it deep. But this gives you a pretty good description of what you need to do and what somebody like me is going to expect when I see the data pack. 43210, we'll go through it. There's a lot of stuff in there that may or may not apply to your specific field approval, right? If you got a real simple one, there's things in there that you're going to be thumbing past, and I'll show you here in a minute. But it covers all the scenarios. So if you need an AFMS, things like that. So let's just back it up a little bit here. So now you've got that far. What you really need to do is find out if you really need a field approval. And again, I'm starting with the basics, but a lot of people come to me with stuff that, as an IA, I would just drop it in and sign it off. It's a minor. And they're like, well, it had an SDC, or someone else did a field approval and I want to do what they did. It's like, fine, but do you really need to? Think about it. The major and minor, you're already IAs, so we don't need to get into that, but as you know, there's some gray there. There can be, and if there's some interpretation there on what could be major and what could be minor. You can get caught up if you start hanging out with Canadians. Everything's a major to those guys. They can't wipe their butt without, Transport Canada giving them permission. So don't get caught up in that. Once I guess I can name names because my guy from the old days is retired, Ruben Saldana. Ruben had me, when I was a IA down in Kodiak, get a field approval for an STC, a Canadian STC, that was just gaskets for the EDO covers. You ever seen those rubber gaskets? That was an STC in Canada. And he said, well, it's an STC, so you got to get it validated. So we got that STC one time validated, and at the end of it, when he was signing it off, I was like, does this seem like it should be a field approval to you? Because it's just gaskets. And he's like, well, now that you mention it, yeah, we probably could have backed up on 3 months worth of paperwork on that. We got, that airplane still has a field approval for that, those stupid gaskets on EDO floats. It's just an extreme case, especially for him, because he was an anti-paperwork guy. But it just never crossed his mind until it was, already in the works. But, is it really a major alteration? And, how to determine it. Will the altered aircraft, there's ways of doing this. This is what I think of, is it going to operate the same as it did, unaltered? Is there going to be any big changes? Yeah, these are things that you already know as an IA. But you really got to think about it with a field approval. And is it going to be a design change? Well, if it's a major type design change, now you're getting into the range of, STCs. So you got to think about that. And that's something that, you talk to me and we can decide. But some of them are pretty obvious. I'll show you an example in a minute. It does really come down sometimes to your own experience of whether something's a minor. It doesn't sound right, but it really does sometimes, is that you have to think about it, what you're doing, and I'll show you here in a minute, and I wrote, oh my gosh, you have to make a judgment call, because this is something that I just turned 60 a while back. Judgment calls were a thing, new people, they're used to having everything like the military has, it's like, what am I allowed to do? Well, think about this, I had this discussion with somebody out back earlier. In the United States, the way the rules are written, U.S. code, unless there's a specific rule that says you can't, then you can. Keep that in your mind. Keep that in your head. That should be your mantra. Unless the FAA specifically told you that you cannot do it, then you can. I'm sorry, Scott. but the thing is, they really do say you can't a lot. So make sure you check it out. There is a difference between Canada and the United States when it comes to that. The Queen, or King now, I guess, that it's pretty much you can't until we tell you you can. And so there's, a lot of times we get these, I work on de Havillands a lot, and you're dealing with a lot of Canadians on that. And it's a different philosophy. And when you talk to them, they're like, I talked to Bill Alder down at Sealand a while back, and he was like, wow, that's a good point. We're going to start acting like that. It was a specific thing on a beaver. But yeah, I got my point across. Anyways, you got to make a judgment call sometimes and use your experience and, call your friends, call if you have to call, whoever, but figure it out. You got to have something to back it up. Back up, you You can't just turn around and say, well, this was a, field approval, major alteration before, but I'm going to call it a minor. But you know what I mean. There's a lot of things. Here's an example. So the owner comes to me and he says, I got a voltage regulator. It's a steam gauge, but I really want this EI. Why? I don't know. But I want this EI, voltage regulator. He already has a gauge, right? He already has a hole in his cockpit where the gauge used to be. And it's the same size as the instrument he wants to put in there. It takes the same wires, and it might use a different shunt, but that also drops in too. Sometimes they don't even use a different shunt because it's an internal shunt. So, there's no operational differences. There's nothing the pilot has to do. The only thing making it a, possibly someone might think it's a major alteration is because it already had an STC. But this airplane isn't listed on the AML. And then not only does it already not have an STC, but it already might have another airplane just like it in a fleet of however many Beavers has the same gauge with a field approval. It's like, well, the precedent has now been set. Somebody else field approved it. So then their PMI says, well, this one was field approved, I want them all the same. Well, it's easier for those guys to just come to me and say, let's get them signed off, than to fight their PMI on that. So it ends up being a field approval, but it could have gone either way. And I say that because to me, that's a minor. As an IA, something like that, I'm usually going to look at it and I'm going to say, this is an elemental installation, right? There's nothing here that's special. There's no DER involved. There's no engineering. There's installation instructions that come with it that are approvable. They're all there. And none of them are the type of installation instructions that need specific approval because they line right up with what's already in the maintenance instructions. So you can look at that and you can say, this is a judgment call. You can say, I really want someone to back me up and do a field approval on this. And that's just fine. But as an IA, you might want to make that determination. No questions. Go ahead. What? Elemental. Sorry. Yeah. I'm going to misspell stuff throughout. So it's just a quiz to keep you on your toes. You get the drift, right? I'm not taking English lessons here, but yeah, I'm sure you got the thing. So here's another one: mud flaps on a Beaver, right? I don't know how many guys you've done this. Kevin Ferris has this one, and he's always done field approvals for it. Maybe he should get an STC, but it's a pretty simple one, and there's data for it. And this one, this one is definitely a field approval because now you're adding something to the airplane that wasn't there before, right? And anyways, it was recently approved by somebody else, possibly. You got another 337 from another airplane that you can refer to. So, you can come to me with this and you can use that data, possibly. We take a look at it and we take a look at your airplane, okay? So you got to have not just the 337 that somebody stamped, What about the rest of the data? The installation instructions, the ICA, Kevin has this stuff. Sketches, anything else that goes along with that little check at the bottom that says attached, pages attached. You need all that stuff if you're going to use that for your previously approved data that you're going to refer to on a new approval, right? An iPhone clip or an iPhone picture of block 8 with no front, isn't going to do it. You need more than that. You need it all. And if in this case, it's not that hard to come by. But a lot of times people will grab something and they'll just say, well, this has been approved before, another airplane, here it is. Get it all. And so let's see what I got at the bottom. So yeah, you can't just buy a set from the salvage yard, which you could do from Dave down at Sutton Aircraft Salvage. He has a bunch of those, but he's not going to sell you any data with it. He's just going to sell you the stuff. So then you got to go find your data. Then you can come to me. We'll get them field approved. You might be able to find an STC on some of them. It's 206 or something like that. So moving on. So you think you got approvable data, right? You think you got everything lined up. You're going to contact me. You can contact your ASI. I don't know how that's going for you, but those guys are pretty busy. I don't see very many raised hands on getting field approvals, so apparently not that well. But I hear from those guys that, that's why we're here, to help, because field approvals are like not just the bottom of their to-do list, but under that. Like they got crashes, enforcement, and more enforcement, and then and a few other things, 135, compatibility, and it just goes on, and I think field approval's down there somewhere, and like my guy, Danny Odom, showed me a list of proposed field approvals that he hasn't had a chance to get to when I started this, and I think there was 40 something on there. It was a lot. So he's like, I don't know when I'm ever going to get to these. Probably never. So, that's why we're here, DARs, to try and fix that problem. Because a lot of those field approvals that are sitting there, and I've got some of these, they've handed them over to me. They've been sitting there for a while waiting for somebody to do something with them. And people need them. They need them to operate. I've had to have them for Cleveland Wheels and Brakes. Thank God there's an STC now, but years ago for the Otter, it was going to hold up our season. And it got to the point to where they, well, you might as well just put the Goodyears back on. Well, they went off the end of the runway with the Goodyear brakes. So, this is a safety thing, but we got it done. And that was, back in 2011 or 12, I think. So you got your data. And so the first thing you want to do, when I get one, the first thing I do is check that aircraft's registration, because I don't want you to find out you have a pink slip. Then I'll ask you if you have your data package. What do you have? We can talk about it. I'll ask you what you have. If I need to coach you a lot, I'm going to charge you. I'm not that expensive, so, I'll charge you. I'm not going to tell you everything up here as far as the charges, but talk to me if you're interested. And if I have to hold your hand, then you're going to get charged for that. But we'll get you your approval, because you're paying me. So, and that, what it comes down to is, you have to build your data pack. I can't build it for you, right? I'm just your DAR. I can't do it for you. You're the only one with access to the aircraft. You're the only one with access to the owner. I can have those things, but why would I? It's your field approval that you're trying to get for an owner, or it's maybe you're the owner and mechanic, but either way, it's your field approval, right? So you got to build your own data packet. I'm not building it for you. I have people call me up and say, how's it going? I haven't done anything, because I asked you guys to build me a data packet and you haven't yet. So when you tried, I said, that's not good enough, and I told you exactly what to do, and you haven't done it. So nothing's happened. So that's kind of why I'm here, is to try and spur this thing along, because it's not that hard. If the field approval is reasonably obtainable, I'll go through the process with you right to the end, and we'll get it done. Or if there's some good reason why we can't get it done, you'll know. Once you start the process, if you hire me, you're not backing out. I'm going to charge you. I had one guy, I was right to the end. I already had to go ahead. It was already in the system. All I had to do was sign it. And I'm actually printing block 3, signing it off, and I get the text, I'm calling this whole thing off. These floats aren't going to work. It was a float field approval. That kind of set me off. I said, no, you're getting the field approval. It's going to, you're getting it, and you're getting charged. I don't care. Put it in your logbook, and you'll have it. If you don't ever install it, but once you start it, especially with me, we put a lot of work and time into it. You don't want to be calling it off in the middle, because I think he was surprised that it was actually going along. I think he kind of thought, oh, well, this is going to take a year. And we had it done in a short amount of time. So it worked out good. And he got it, and he's using it now. So you don't immediately need to put that in. Once you got the approval, if it's, if it's summer and that thing is for skis, put that in your logbooks. Once fall comes and you're going to put your skis on, now you've got the approval. You definitely want to get ahead of the game. Same way with now for the summer. You want to get ahead of it. You don't want to be calling saying, I really need, I need this done so I can operate this year. And it's already May, for your floats. So get it going early, because it does take time. Sometimes they go pretty smoothly, but they usually take a little bit of time. With me, they take not as much time as the ASIs, because I'm not called off for crashes and things like that. I can work with you. So here's what you're going to do. Now we're getting down to the meat of it. This is how you build it. You're going to build the field approval. You're going to go to AC 43210, and the checklists are right there. And this is where I'm going to start my little rant again. Once you get in there, figure out how to take that checklist out. It's not that hard, and put it in a Word or Adobe format that I can work with. I need to be able to format this thing. It's not that hard. Ask your kids, your teenagers, whatever. This ain't the 90s anymore. I need to be able to take that thing, and I need to be able to say, oh, he spelled, elemental wrong. I'm gonna, I need to be able to back that up and spell it right. I need to be able to do that. I don't want to have to send it back to you for tiny little changes and have you, being busy in the middle of somebody's annual, and 3 weeks later finally send it back to me and I find something else wrong. I need to be able to get that done. So pull those out of there, pull those pages out, the field approval checklist, and the other checklist that we're going to talk about, and make those into separate sendable data that's not protected, that I can correct, that you can correct, and send them to me that way. Those are going to be your drafts. Field approval checklist, any substantiating data, like we just talked about, your other previously approved 337s, 8130-3s from a DER, if you have something like that. This is where you're going to put all that together in a packet, and you're going to make that part of your substantiating data. FAA Form 337, of course, this is going to be your draft. In Block 8, in the back of the 337, you're going to write in as if you are installing it. This is what we were doing. This is removed, replaced, all this stuff. Put your data in. Refer to whatever you need to refer to, and describe what you're doing. Just describe it. And you've seen lots of 337s in the past. It's not hard, but go ahead and describe that, and then your next thing is going to be, I'll work with you if I don't like the description. I'll tell you, hey, you need to put a little more detail, whatever. Refer to your sketches if you have sketches, things like that. Then you're going to get your compliance checklist. This is also in 43210. This is something that a lot of people don't know anything about, and this is why I said find out if your airplane is a Car 3 FAR airplane, whatever it is, because you're going to make your checklist. You're going to go to Car 3. You're going to get back on DRS, and you're going to start perusing that thing and looking for the applications that apply to you. If you're going to put say you want to put your seaplane prop on, this is a common one, and keep it on there when you're operating on big tires. Now you're up off the ground, and your seaplane prop's going to be, within whatever the inches are that Car 3 requires. Well, there's a car that describes that, and you need to, deflate your struts and go to the worst case scenario and measure that. If it meets, then you put that in. There's a graph in the compliance checklist. There'll be a graph. Now you can use your own format, and it describes that. 43210 describes how to do that, but the easiest way is just to use their format. You write that Car 3 reference in, and you describe how you complied with it, right? And you just keep going down. Anything that you find in there that applies, you put it in and you make your list. Now, if you're using an STC and you're just not on the AML, like this thing was, all the 185s, but they didn't, this happens sometimes, they didn't realize that there was a 185. So it starts at A, and it goes all the way to A185F, right? But there's no straight 185. And so you got to get a field approval now saying that it's okay to use that. And that's a pretty easy one to get. When you build your compliance checklist, on the front of most STCs, there'll be a whole big list of cars, FARs, whatever, that were complied with when they did that. That's the beginning of, or maybe it's all of, your compliance checklist. Make yourself up a good compliance checklist, and that is another page. That's going to be something that you got to show that this airplane still meets the regulations that it met, and its production, its certification basis that it was when it was new. So you didn't change it so much that it's now a different airplane. So you got to show that, and then that's how you show it in the compliance checklist. And now we get to the maintenance information checklist. That's also in the back few pages of 43210, and it's pretty simple. A lot of you guys that have been doing this for a long time used to do ICAs, and you'll see ICAs, like a whole list of ICAs on Block 8. You don't have to do that. If you get an old 337, it's not that old. It's not that old because it hasn't been that long ago, but not that long ago, you had to put all that in Block 8. Just take that information out. It's the exact same information and put it in the maintenance information checklist. You'll find that that information, all those items are exactly the same as what they used to call ICAs. Now, we're still doing ICAs, real ICAs. If you need ICAs, then that's a whole different subject. But you'll find that on these simple 337, these simple field approvals, that what we had for ICAs were just NA, 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 NA. Most of it, I don't know if you guys remember this, but just check off everything in the maintenance information checklist and fill that out. The only things that are going to come up in that thing that you're going to have to define are going to be anything that changes in inspection, maintenance inspection. It'll ask you if there's any overhaul times that are changed. It'll ask you for special tools. If you're putting a Sentinich ground adjustable prop, these are all STC now, but we did some of these. There's a tool for putting in there and changing the prop pitch. You got to list that because it asks for special tools, tool number, whatever. It's all in there. So you just do that, and if those 3 items are done, we're well on our way. Those 4 items, of course, including the 337, but the field approval checklist, the compliance checklist, and the maintenance, what I call the MIC, those 3 are a big chunk out of what you need for data approval. And if you review AC 43-210 and really take a look at it, you'll see that these are the items they're recommending you to use, and they want you to use, and you're probably not going to get an approval without it. One of the things that happens is when you fill out the field approval checklist, you put your information in there as the installing mechanic with your A&P number. You put your owner's. The owner is the applicant. Keep that in mind. You're not the applicant. The owner's the applicant. Whoever owns the airplane, they're the ones that, and you're their agent. But the mechanic and the owner need to work together on this. Owners come to me and they say, I want to get this, that, and the other. And the first thing I ask is, who's your mechanic? If they say, Dave Matthews, whatever, then I'll say, well, I'll talk to him in a year or so when he gets time. But, a lot of times it's a guy with an idea and he doesn't understand the process. That's why we're talking here. You're going to have these guys come to you. And if you want to bounce stuff off of me, call me, and I'll say, a lot of times I can tell you, oh yeah, we have some people that recently did that, and I can help you with prior approval. I can help you out with some of that stuff. The longer I do it, the more stuff I'll have. I actually have quite a bit right now, but it grows all the time. And you got your information on there, your owner's information, the aircraft information. I need all this stuff when I go to put this into the system. We have a system called DMS. When I put the system in, it asks all these questions, and that's why I need that field approval checklist, because I'm drawing it right from that and putting it into the FAA DMS. So I can't do anything unless you fill that out. I don't usually do much with the maintenance information checklist except look at it and review it. That's your thing. If I see something on there I don't like, I'll talk to you about it. The compliance checklist, that's something we're going to talk about a lot. And a lot of times we end up having to call engineers and people like that, and even, God forbid, the ACO. Where's Steve? We'll call him and he'll say, you can't do that with a field approval. But anyways, which cars apply, right? Which ones apply? Which FARs apply? Does this one really apply? And sometimes we'll build a list that way. We'll use the ACO, we'll use, some of the DERs, we'll use prior approval, and we'll use the ones we obviously know, like the prop length one. And then your 337 is going to say you have to keep those tires on, those tall tires, otherwise your prop's not going to meet the criteria. So there's a way to do that. And same way, you go to skis, you got to go back to your small tires. So now you got to think about that. Do you really want to limit yourself? But those are things that you have to keep in mind. And when you write your 337 Block 8 up, you got to, any limitations like that's going to be in there. And also in the field approval checklist, it asks you things like that. Are there any new limitations? Well, if you have, the aircraft must be on 850 tires, that's a new limitation, right? If you get down to the point to where you're going to need a flight manual supplement, then that's a whole other subject. And a lot of times it is. And truthfully, the flight manual supplements is the big bottleneck sometimes, because I can't sign off a AFMS. You got to get a DER for that, or it's got to go to ACO, and Al Wilson at ACO can review it, but he has a list a mile long that he has to go through, so it's going to take a long time. We're going to get to that here in a minute. But again, I want to stress, all this stuff needs to be in an edible format. It needs to be on a Adobe or a Word platform or Google, whatever, something that a modern, normal person can actually look at. It can't just be an iPhone picture of a blank sheet that you scribbled your name in. It needs to actually be typed in, at least if you're going to come to me. Because if it comes in and it looks like it was made in the 80s, it's going in the trash, or it's going to get right back to you. Because you can't get all this stuff done without some sort of compatibility. You need to be able to make corrections on these things. And that's something I've run into a lot. And it's surprising to me how many guys, and I know we're all wrench turners. I mean, I fought off computers for so long, but the FAA uses it, and so we're stuck with it, and this is how we do. But a lot of guys have come to me and say, I'm not a computer guy. I don't know how to do this. Well, there's enough other people out there in the world that you can get help. Get help with somebody in your family. I have 3 daughters. They don't really help me, but I just wanted to tell you guys that because I need love. But sometimes they do help me with stuff like this. And, truthfully, it's not that hard to figure out on your own. I will say this crazy PowerPoint right here, I'd never done one before, and I figured it out in about a day. So it's not that hard. If you set your mind to it, I mean, you can pull aircraft engines off, and you can do annuals, you can figure this stuff out. So, when you come to me and say, I'm not much of a computer guy, like, well, I'm going to charge you $125 an hour if you don't figure it out. So it's well worth your while to figure it out. That's now. This is just an example of a part that goes to something that we're PMIing, but this could be something that you attach to your substantiating data. It doesn't have to be this fancy. This came from a DER, but a lot of times we're just talking sketches. But the nicer you make it, the easier it is for everybody's eyes. So if you get it drafted like this, that's great. And ACO guys love this because they're all engineers. So, although they like to criticize it too. They always sort of like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. But anyways, additional items I'm going to need for this. I had some kickback on this sometimes too. It's kind of funny, but the DMS asks for this stuff, and I need to know it, or I can't get your field approval done. And that is your contact information and phone number in case somebody needs to call you, your aircraft owner's phone number. You can't just be some, guy in the Caymans that you don't want to reveal. You got to tell me who he is and give me his phone number. um, the location where the mod's going to be installed, it doesn't have to be there right now. It doesn't have to be opened up right now, but when it's going to get done, I need to put something in that block. This means the name of a business. The name of the business isn't necessary. It's nice, but the address is necessary. It doesn't have to be a business, in other words. It can just be somebody's private hangar or garage, but it has to have an address. And then wherever the nearest airport is that it's going to be, towed out to and flown. These I need to finish the DMS online. So that's why I need those things. So this is a thing I wrote up of things I want to make sure everybody is not going to put in their data pack. This is unhelpful items that I see. Pleadings in block 8 about why this should be approved. We're not your mom. This guy had it in the past, and I think, it's a great mod, and I've flown it, and it's like, I don't want to, it's not appropriate to put that kind of stuff, and even if it sounds really official, a lot of times it's like people are putting stuff in there, and they're saying, they're listing data that someone else used or that they think will work, but they're not putting it in, they're not showing data and compliance. They're just suggesting that maybe this is a good idea, and this is why. The way that you put in block 8 should be all about showing, what you're going to do, describing it, and then referring to the data that you're using that's going to go with it. So, you don't need to make arguments. You can make them verbally to me, if you want to put them on a separate piece of paper or whatever, but you don't need to put it in official 337 block 8 and send it to Oak City. ICAs, we talked about this. They're the same information as the MIC. This is simple installations. These gauges and things like that we're talking about, things that are already approved on other STCs. You're going to use the MIC for that. If there's any separate ICAs that the STC lists, you can just list those in there as CICAs. They've already been done. If you end up with a really complicated field approval that needs ICAs, it's probably going to get bumped up to a STC anyways at that point. But if you end up with one that, the ACO says you got to do ICAs on, then that'll be a separate. We'll tell you at that time. But normally you're just going to stick with the MIC. That's what it's there for. And if you read AC 43-210, it'll tell you that. And it talks about ICAs too. But for a while there, we were off on a tangent about ICAs, and everybody was writing them in block 8, and you see these big long things of these ICAs. They called them ICAs, but they weren't real ICAs. They were just NA, and a few other things. And it was actually the same information, like I said before, that's in the MIC. Data from another make and model. I can't take data from a Stinson because it has the same engine and apply it to your mall. It doesn't work like that. It may be maybe if there's enough compatibility between the two models, maybe they could be part of, showing compliance. But normally, you're not gonna be able to use, if you have a PA-18, you're not gonna be able to use a PA-12. I know they're very similar, but a lot of times if it's something that in those it doesn't make any difference, it won't matter anyways. But in this case, if you stick to your make and model, you're gonna have a lot better. You're gonna use somebody's prior approval. You're gonna have a lot better results with approval, sticking to what you have and not going off with, we had a T-craft and we want to put that in our P-18. Well, sorry, I mean, sometimes maybe it doesn't matter, but on most things it does. Go ahead. Yep. Well, yeah, in that case, and that's a perfect candidate for a field approval, because now you got something that's only approved on the STC. They forgot about the PA 12, and we've done some of these recently, and I say, I use that as an example, but the fact that it was previously approved on the P18 isn't nothing. It's something. It would be nice if it was, a perfect match to the airplane you're trying to modify. But, it isn't as good a data, but I wouldn't say throw it in the trash, but try to stick to as close as you can, and it'll help. If you got a P1895 and you want to put it in a P18150, you're probably going to be okay. I mean, it depends on what it is, but I mean, you're a lot closer now. You're a lot closer in make and model, so you got to be reasonable with it. You got to think about that a little bit. I say I got one that was C201 Macaulay prop. This didn't get approved, and somebody had it on a 0470 on a Stinson, and it's been approved quite a few times. Dave Schwartz knows about this one, and it had different crankshaft counterweights. I noticed that too, but it had been approved, so I was like, I'm not going to say anything. But Dave found it, and I was like, dang, I was hoping he wouldn't find that. But did you ever figure out what difference that makes, or why that can't, Yeah. So, yeah, so it would possibly vibrate or whatever, or it just hasn't been tested is all. Yeah. I wondered about that. We called McCully, they were like, we're not getting into that. Buy the newer prop. We're not making that one anymore. That's what they told me. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what the guy said. He said, if I knew off the top of my head, I'd tell you, but I'm not going to spend any time researching it, So, but it was interesting because apparently those had been approved here and there, and nobody ever had any issues with it. So possibly you could get a DER or somebody to run some tests, but it would cost you a lot of money. So that one died. But it was interesting. The reason I brought this up was because the guy who wanted me to sign it off had data from a Stinson with the 0470, but he had the 0470 in his mall, and so, well, he had whatever engine it was in his mall, and it didn't, I said, did you have anything for a mall? Because, it'd be a lot easier to go over, but no, all he had was a Stinson, so that kind of didn't look good right from the start. So different models, anytime you're going to try and use that for data, you're going to want to stay close to it. You're not going to want to stray off and, odd things. And you can't just say, my prop is almost the same, or my extended baggage is 6 inches long, and, on my previous approval, but I want mine to be 14 inches, so it'll be fine, right? I mean, be reasonable, right? And then now that we're talking about those, anything like that, when you describe it in Block 8, I did this extended baggage or whatever, or I put this fish tube in, and it's this long, make a sketch. If you're not good at sketching, find somebody who is. Take a picture. If you have somebody that already put one in, take a picture, add that to, there's a little check mark box at the bottom of Block 8 that says attached. More data is attached, so that's what that's for. Give us something that we can use so that we can visualize it, because you're calling me out of the blue, and I'm in the middle of working on an otter, and you're telling me about a mall or T-craft baggage compartment, and if I got time, I'll talk to you. A lot of times I'm calling you after work when I'm done with my regular job, And I got to get my mind into gear of what you're doing. A picture really helps a lot. It really helps. Any kind of a picture, any kind of a sketch, I don't want to have to come all the way from Talkeetna to, Juneau or something to look at your thing that you could have just took a picture of. And I won't, because I can't afford it. But I did have people call me from long ways away, and they gave me really good data. One of the nice things about the DAR program right now is that they're not restricting our area right now. It's the whole United States. So it works out good, but I don't really want anybody from, Florida calling me, because I don't know what the heck they're doing down there. But anyways, give us some good data on that. Give us pictures. It doesn't have to end up staying. All this stuff is for to get it all in the head of me and in the head of anybody that goes back through that airplane in the future, so they know what you did. And what about if you ever wanted to use your data again, or one of your friends wanted to use it to modify his plane? Then the more data you have in there, the more descriptive you are, the more you're going to be able to remember what you did, and what worked and what didn't, and how you got to that point where you finally applied for a field approval. You have those sketches and those pictures, and you have them in this person's log. You can just go to them or your log, and there they are. It helps a lot. It really does. Before and after pictures are really nice sometimes. Attachments, there's so many different things that can be modified. And wiring diagrams. I mean, if you're going to do wiring and stuff, a lot of times it's just a simple wire diagram. You're not going to, if you've got something really complicated and you got to do a wire diagram, you're probably not going to be in the realm of a field approval anyways. So usually it's going to be pretty simple. If you added lights and things like that, so you can draw that out yourself mostly. Like I said, make a wiring diagram and label all your wires. Refer to it in block 8. See sketch 1, see diagram, whatever. Put that in there. It helps. I think we talked about this. Yeah, vague descriptions, no pictures. Prior 337s from another airplane not signed in block 3. This is something I put in there because people are like, I got prior approval. Yeah, here it is. You're like, but no one ever stamped it. Yeah. Well, I heard they did later. Like, well, I need to see that. You can't just give me, or just block 8. Like, I don't even get to see the front. I just saw the description. Like, this is it. It's like, yeah, great. This is great. I think they did a great job. Where's the actual approval? I need to see if it was approved, right? Now, block 8's great, but I need to see the front too. Block 3 needs to be signed, because that's not a prior approval if I just, only saw the description. So, yeah, go ahead. Wait, you faded out at the end. Wrong with giving it to, here, you need to, what's wrong with, I lost you after that. You faded out.
See you finish the whole process. You get your stamp from, the FAA. So it's all done, you can install it. You have to send me a copy of it to the FAA down in Oak City. What's wrong with sending the whole package? Anything?
What are you sending to the FAA?
Well, normally you send just the 337 form.
Right.
Right. What about sending everything you researched?
You don't have to send,
No, I know you don't have to.
you can, but that doesn't mean they'll keep it.
Okay.
They'll be able to find it.
Because I had an FAA guy tell me that was illegal.
You can send anything you want in. In fact,
That's what I thought.
you can send it all in. They will scan the blank side of the page.
Right. And I was thinking, why not let them
Yeah.
keep it as a digital form?
Well, because you can't count on it being there when you want it. Usually when you want to get something from the FAA, you go back and they're like, we don't, right? I can't find that.
Well, don't they keep it as part of the digital record for the
And then
whole airplane?
the next thing is always like, it's not our responsibility to keep it, it's just our courtesy. You know,
Right.
it's a courtesy for us, we'll do it, but we're not gonna be, you can't hold us liable. So, anyways, the thing is, you need it for your logs. So you need to keep that in your logs.
Right.
And you need to have that data. You don't want to have to get to a point to where you want to use that data again and rely on the FAA to get it. I mean, you're going to have to go back and deal with registration. They're going to have to send you pictures. And, I've had some luck with that and some not. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, but I would still do both. I would hold on to it. I wouldn't count on it. Send that in for sure. You got to send it in anyways. So, or you got to send them something. You got to send them the 337, and you check sheets attached so yeah, send it all in. And they're getting, sometimes I think they're getting better. So you might be able to get that information back if you ever need it, and you might not. I've had really bad luck with trying to get information from old airplanes, but that's information that was stored in the past. So information that's stored now, you might have better luck with that. Information that was stored in the past, I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to resurrect an airplane and you don't have logbooks, and you're going to rely on the FAA registry to look at what they got, sometimes it's really detailed, and all the 337s with all the data is there. And I've seen pictures and all kinds of stuff when I did research and tried to find. And then other times I've got a scanned copy of Block 8 that's smudged, and you can't read any of it, and that's it. And you're like, this is the one thing I wanted them to have. So you can't count on it. I don't know who does the scanning down there, but it might just be some teenage girls or boys that just scan everything, and they pay minimum wage. Just scan. I think that's kind of what it is, because they scan, if it's got a fingerprint on the back from a smudge, they scan that. and that if you can see through the paper and see everything backwards, they scan that. So they scan everything. They don't let anything go. But whether or not you can read it or not is kind of up for grabs. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, I'm moving on to flight manual supplements. So, this is a bottleneck that happens a lot. And if you got to get the ACO involved to make a flight manual supplement, you got to ask yourself a question, what's changing for the pilot? I mean, is he got to change the way he flies the airplane? Is there things he needs to know? I mean, a lot of times you're doing a mod that doesn't change anything. In fact, that's kind of the point, is to make something more reliable and make it to where the pilot doesn't have to do anything different, and the things that he does actually work, and so we're making mods like that, and those make great field approvals. But if you're changing something that changes the limitations in the cockpit, changes airspeeds, changes RPMs, changes things like that, now you got to tell the pilot about it. I try to, our RPMs, gauge markings, airspeeds. A good way to determine, this is what I try to do, is to look at the original AFM and start thumbing through it. Say, in my case, say it's an Otter. They got an old de Havilland AFM. You start flipping through it. Oh, wait a minute, this thing says it has a 1340 on it. And I got a Garrett GPE 331. I need a flight manual supplement. And the flight manual supplement for that thing is 3 times thicker than the original entire de Havilland AFM. So, that's an extreme case, but in a case where you just put something in there that just changes, say, RPM limitations, a prop that changes, caution on the ground, you got to add a caution mark. Well, that gauge has got to come out and it's got to go get remarked. Now you're getting into the realm of there might have to be an AFMS. And that's how I usually determine it. I start looking through, and they usually have all the limitations in there. A lot of times they even have pictures of all the gauges, and you can look at those and say, wait a minute, this one's not going to apply anymore. I might have to get an AFMS, I might have to have a supplemental flight, flight manual. So now, this is right out of the regulations here. Alterations that result in a change to limitations, procedures, performance, or loading information from a current flight manual or placards require an applicant to develop a revised or supplemental information as addressed in paragraph 314. All right, I copied that. You may present the supplemental information either as modified or as additional markings and placards. Now, this is something that comes up quite often, if you can address it with a placard. And there's more liberal rules for this for older Car 3 airplanes. Airplanes that were certificated before flight manuals, placards are the way to go. If you just did something pretty minor, and the AFMS is just going to say, something really simple. A lot of times you can just be addressed with a placard. And we talk about this a lot. Can we just address this with a placard? Because that'll save us from having to draft an AFMS. If you have to draft an AFMS, I don't know if I have the next. We're going to go into repairs. Let's go back. Then you got to talk to, probably, if you're going to get it done timely, you're going to talk to a DER who has AFMS authority. And I'll lead you to a guy. We got a couple guys, Sean Milkey and Jason Kepler in the state here that can do it, and they can sign it off, and they can get that thing done for you. It's going to cost $1,000 for them to do it, even if it's super minor. But that's something that has to be done. Now you have a flight manual supplement, and you don't get your field approval until that's done. It will come with a 8110-3, which I think I had a picture of. Oops, I'm backwards. We'll go back to that one. Yeah, so it'll come with that, and this is for that fork, but it'll come with that 8110-3 with the signature on the bottom, and it'll say AFMS, whatever, and the date. This is something that came up actually just yesterday. If over time the field approval has been granted for a while and the airplane's been flying, and the owner of the field approval and the airplane decides that AFMS needs to be updated, then you got to go back to that DER and say, I need an update. And then I don't know if he's going to charge you, but that's almost like a separate approval. You've got this right here for the AFMS, and you've got the field approval for the installation. Okay, so that complicates things quite a bit, and it, frankly, it holds things up quite a bit. It clogs things up, especially when it's a real simple field approval. Other than this, it's like, it was so simple, but it needs a flight manual supplement. Now you can go to the ACO, and you can say, here's my draft. You can write it yourself. My buddy had one, and it's simple. Here it is. It's one page, and send that in to the ACO. I can help you with it. It'll go to the ACO, and it'll go to Al Wilson at ACO, and Al has a stack of them. And then Al will call me and say, didn't you tell this guy that he should go to a DER? and I'll go, well, it's really simple. We hoped you would just do it. Well, it's going to be 3 months, And so, and then I see Al down at Fish Creek dip netting. Hey, you could have been signing my AFMS. But anyways, he has to have some time off too. But yeah, I guess, I don't know why he's the only one, but he's the only one that can do it apparently in the world. So I don't know. He's the only one I know of. Is that right, Dave? For Alaska. Yeah.
Al knows Al knows how to do these and can do them a lot more efficiently than a lot of other people can.
Okay.
So that's why they tend to go to Al.
I hope that they can get some more DERs that can do it or whatever, because it does clog the system up a little bit, especially for the really simple ones. I mean, they have to be done, but, you know, if it's a one-page thing and it takes 3 months to get done, you know, it seems difficult.
Anybody you know wants to become a DER that to do this that has the experience, send them to the ACO.
I will. I only got a few minutes, but I just wanted to hit repairs real quick. With repairs, you know, a lot of these field approvals are not requiring, they're all mods, but when you get into repairs, you know, there's a lot of approved data out there. I put an example in here. In some cases, you can find acceptable data that may be approvable in, like, say, a Goose SRM that might be used on a widget. We've done that before. I have, as a mechanic, and we had that approved by a PMI, an ASI. We sent it to him and said, hey, look, you know, there's no SRM for the widget, but this is the exact same thing. You know, it's the exact same thing. It's just bigger in a Goose, right? So case by case, you know, an engineer might look at that and say, well, wait a minute, you know, that Goose is bigger, so it has to take more. Well, in most cases, the widget is smaller, so, you know, you're going to be okay. It's overkill, but it has to be looked at. And so a lot of times you need to go to, that's why I said it's possibly approved by a DAR if the data is acceptable. Somebody like me, I can look at that and say, I've done this before, you know, and I mean, I know this will work, but I still might need backup from a DER. And I usually will call somebody and say, what do you think about this, this repair? There's a lot of good information that can be applicable in AC 4313 that you could probably use without a field approval. And there's so much data out there that, you know, if you're worried about whether or not your repair is going to be approvable or it's going to hold up, you kind of need an engineer to look at it anyways. So if you can get your data signed off with the 8130-10 and some repair schemes from a structural DER that's approved for that type of thing, that's the ideal way to do it. If you have a really good repair scheme, you know other people have used it before, and, you know, say it's a spar cap strip on a widget that's corroded and you want to put a plug in there, there's a really good repair scheme for that in the Goose manual. You know, this is, I don't know how many people are working on Gooses anymore, but but I am getting old. But that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, just using that as an example. That's military SRMs that are out there, and they did a really good job with their repair schemes. So you could do something like that. Previously approved data is probably going to be one of your best bets. Owner produced parts, I want to hit on that really quick. These can be field approved. A DER is going to usually be involved. This is an example. This is an Otter tail fork that we're working on PMA. The first prototype of it, we had a DER sign at 8110-3 that it was exactly the same as the old one, only better. And then we had that field approved. And so we had the 8110-3. We had the ACO actually reviewed it, and everything got signed off. It became a field approval, and it's on the airplane now. And not this one, but this is the newer version, but a version of this. And now we're working on getting PMA for that so that you guys can buy it. Anybody has an Otter, it's going to be for sale. It's coming up. We're getting them made right now. I don't have the PMA yet, but as soon as I get one more made, then the MITO comes up, reviews our process, and hopefully issues us the PMA. But we have to actually make one for them to do that. That's something I wanted to hit on, and I think that's the end. This is my informal checklist. Maybe take a picture of it for if you want to call me. These are things that you should probably think about. I put this up really quick so that you could build yourself a data packet before you call me. And that's all the stuff that we've pretty much just talked about. And I think that's it. That's the end of it. I just got called in. Don't ask me any questions. I don't have any answers.